thank you very much, Kevin, for taking time out to have a chat. Really.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it, and appreciate all the work you're doing and everything that's happening around Independent Venue Week, and also for doing this in the evening in the UK.
Yeah. Well, I just thought that. Well, I just thought, considering that in the UK we haven't got much to do anyway, because we haven't got any gigs to go out to at the
Yeah,
moment, or
yeah.
like gigs, or it's
I
mostly
figured.
just gigs staying in for at the moment.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I'm
yeah,
finding
yeah,
that all a little weird, to be honest with you.
yeah. I figured you'd be cool with the time because you'd probably be at a show.
Yeah, usually, yeah, well, yeah, usually. I mean, like, my standard daytime would be like now be usually right at the front by the stage somewhere.
Yeah.
Wait,
So
like waiting for the first band to come on or something. Usually about this time, but
yeah,
yeah, I think it's the first time that it's been like probably the longest I've been to not going to a gig. In
yeah. I was going to ask you about that, because you have such a streak going, and live music has been such a key part of your life,
yeah,
all of our lives. But I mean, you are remarkable in your commitment to going out and being part of the community and being and just taking in and supporting so many bands, right? And
but
then our lives changed, and how
yeah.
have you been how have you been holding up through all that?
Well, I mean, it's helped me that through the second lockdown, I've moved down to being with my parents. So I'm actually currently living with my parents at the moment.
Where are you?
So they're down in Plymouth
Okay.
because I'm usually up in Bristol. But when they announced the second lockdown over here, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to be around family, going to be around people who love me, and like kind of I've got the family dog, so that if we get into stressful situations, which sometimes can happen, I can just look at her and go, right, do you want to go out?
Yeah, yeah,
And
I get that. I
then
have a dog too, and man, they're the best.
they are just like I think it's great because of it gives you an incentive to actually get outside because
Yeah.
it's so easily like so I did this admittedly quite a bit during the first lockdown in England, where I was literally keeping myself to myself pretty much almost 24 hours.
Yeah.
I don't know how like you guys have been dealing with it over in the States.
Well, I
Um,
was going to ask you because you mentioned the first and second lockdown. Between those, were there actually shows?
yeah, we had some socially distanced gigs in Bristol. There's a venue called The Lanes who are very active in putting on gigs and stuff, and it was really good because of it. It was like it reminded me of what I missed from not seeing the live shows. It wasn't just so much the music; it was also everything which came around with it. So it was like kind of all the friendships, and so like I had like a kind of like a table full of buddies that would always pre-book the table, sort of thing. And it was mostly local artists who were playing. And to be honest, we're really lucky because if in some of the local bands coming out of Bristol are truly phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, obviously you would have heard of stuff like Idols and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's insane how big they've got.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. Joy is an Active Resistance was my favorite album of that year. Ultramanos was my favorite of 2020. I've been fortunate to have them on the show. I got to host a session that they did during quarantine that they did at Abbey Road
Oh
and
wow!
talked to Bowen. That was maybe 3 months ago or so. And I got to, man, the first time they played here in the States in Seattle, they played, it was right before they blew up, right? So the
Mm,
venue was maybe 200 people.
wow!
And it was, and they had booked it and it sold out immediately. But then it was, the show wasn't until 2 months later. So the demand had built and built. And it was just like, one of those pure cathartic, beautiful shows.
Mm,
And then they've played KEXP like 3 different times at least. And then, we've done some shows with them, and I got to see them at the Bataclan in Paris, the
wow!
shows they did for the live album. Yeah, they to me sort of epitomize the live experience in the last couple of years. And
Mm.
as you're talking about, not just the music itself, but that community that
Yeah.
builds around live shows and also builds around specific bands.
Mm.
And then I think in their case, it's pretty amazing because it's so much more than that. You know, it's like a cathartic release of all
Mm.
this energy and emotion. And
I mean, I've been doing regular Zoom chats with some of the Bristol fan base sort of thing, and they've been very active in actually really supporting each other. So like we were doing things like like things like we were doing like Secret Santa, for instance, because like some of the people living on their own. So it's like, right, okay, we're going to try and do this to try and to try our best to try and keep everyone's kind of like spirits up and like their energies kind of going, sort of thing.
that's super cool.
I mean, like, someone got one of my paintings. So like, and I think that is, that is very much something which I do feel like I'm missing, as if in like that whole thing of like kind of going into a venue and then knowing everyone who's in the venue.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's part of it. You know, there's the social aspect of live shows, um, where you connect with friends, just, even outside of the music itself. You become family if you go to if you have a favorite venue that you go to all the time, that becomes home in a way.
I mean,
Um,
I was going to ask you, what was your favorite venue as like a kind of teenager to go to? Did you have any favorite like kind of places you hang out at?
yeah. So I was fortunate. Well, a couple things. When I grew up in Minneapolis, and there was a key club there in the kind of the punk days, called Jay's Longhorn. And it was a small club, like 200 capacity room or so. And sort of everybody played there that was coming up at that time. So, you know, the Talking Heads or Iggy Pop. Uh,
Wow.
so that, and at that point in time, punk and new wave, whatever, was really out of the mainstream.
Mm,
So the people who went there were bonded over music,
yeah.
and it didn't matter who was playing. I'd go there every night, and part of it was to feel like I was around people
Mm,
that were like me or that mattered, that mattered to me, that were people who really cared about music.
yeah.
Um, and so that was a key club for me kind of early on, but then I had an opportunity, to become the kind of the resident DJ at a club called First Avenue in
Mm,
Minneapolis.
yep. I think I've heard of First Avenue.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's where Prince filmed the movie Purple Rain, and
Wow.
I was there in the 80s era. And when I started there, it was like kind of a cheesy Saturday Night Fever disco. But that era was dying, and we knew something was happening. So I got to be a part of the team that turned it into a venue where, I mean, it was remarkable. It was a huge room, 1,800 people,
Wow,
but
that's big.
but it, but it felt really intimate. So we had a big room, 1,800 people, and part of what made it cool was the stage was pretty high. So the stage is probably 5 feet off the ground.
Mm,
So, and there was a dance floor, and then kind of tiered levels. So no matter where you were, you could see perfectly. So you always had a great line of sight to the band, and it had a great sound system. It's probably the best club I've ever been in to
wow.
this day. And then we
Wow.
also had a smaller room that was like a punk rock room where bands like the Replacements or Husker Du would get their
Wow.
start before they graduated up to the big room. So, but part of what was cool about it is, um, 2, 3, 4 times a week, there'd be bands playing. So it'd be anybody from the Ramones to U2, the first 3 or 4 times U2 played in the US, they
Yeah.
played at First Avenue. And I had a record store a block away.
Wow.
So during the day I'd work at the record store, and we sold mostly imports and cool music from the UK and independent US music. We called it kind of a punk funk. Like it was punk new wave imports or kind of funk, but no mainstream.
It's all very indie, so it's like kind of, I see like the Gang of Four could have poster in the background and stuff like that, and it's like that's instantly when you mention punk, I instantly do think of like stuff like Gang of Four and like,
oh yeah,
just the British explosion of post punk, really.
yeah, exactly. It was sort of that era. As that era was emerging, you know, sort of Joy Division into the post punk, Gang of Four, everything after that. And but it was cool. Like when U2 played the first gig, because of the record store and we were selling their imports. I just went down to the club that day, you know, because I was the DJ at night, and hung out and watched them do their sound check. And they ended up writing 3 or 4 songs that were on October, on the second album.
Wow.
During sound check. So it was like just magical stuff happened. But to kind of get to your original question or point, like the club did, you know, cool bands 3-4 times a week, and Friday, Saturdays were dance nights. And, you know, it was kind of the club to go to in Minneapolis. And because it was so eclectic musically, it became home, like for everybody. Like when you talk about just seeing friends, people grew up there, you know, just they met their partners there, their best friends there, you know, that became these incredible relationships that went way beyond just hanging out and seeing the show, which is amazing in and of itself.
Wow.
And then, so I think that's one of the things that is so important about clubs and independent venues, you know.
I agree. I mean, like, I had the pleasure of I guess places which really take. I mean, I've been really lucky as if been when I moved to Bristol, as if been people really took me in, and I mean places like specific venue which I used to go to a lot was the Louisiana, which is a great little small 150 capacity room, one of the best sounding venues in the UK, and it was just like one of those things where, because I used to really struggle with socializing, so I'd turn up to shows really early, and I'd probably spend most of the time just staring at the posters, just like, you know, like seeing the names like the Strokes or like the Hives, and like just like kind of going, oh, that's a good show to go to, that'd be a good show to go to, and I used to occasionally, like the owners would occasionally come up to me and say hello to me, and I'd be like, oh, hello, and then I'd be just like kind of back to staring off into the distance. And then I found that actually going to shows actually helped break down certain aspects, because of it be like, right, okay, you had a certain reason why you were there.
I totally get that. So the club I was talking about, Jay's Longhorn, when I would go there, you know, I felt like a misfit in the world overall. So I'd go there to be around people that were kind of like me, but I was super shy, so I never talked to anybody, and I always went alone. And I would just hang out, but it felt good, you know. Like for me, I was kind of shy, so I wasn't going to go up and talk to anybody. But there was a comfort being around people who were enjoying the same experience I was.
So, I very much kind of get that. As the same for me, really. So it's like kind of, and I also noticed, you know, kind of like I'd recognize people who go to certain gigs, and I'd go like, oh, look, he's here. They used to, like, one of the promoters in Bristol used to have a saying that if the regulars turned up, there's like me, 7 other people, and quite often they'd be like kind of, because we'd all be down the front, we'd all be like kind of, I'd be kind of usually kind of like left-hand corner sort of thing, and they'd take photographs, and they'd have like kind of like the outlines of all of our heads,
Yeah.
all of
No,
us like kind of stood in a row sort of thing.
yeah. No, that's awesome. That's
And
great. Um, so music and the clubs have became a means for you in part to open up, connect, be more social,
yeah, it definitely
engage.
did. I mean, because I went through, especially in my early 20s, I went through quite a traumatic period where I basically kind of, well, I nearly died from like appendicitis operation going wrong, and then I kind of lost a close friend, and and so I kind of like, I found myself having to sometimes invent split personalities.
Yeah.
So like, I invented a like a kind of like a rap split personality called Manic F, and I used to do like these insane kind of very DIY performances, where basically I kind of wear an orange bodysuit. I used to have like kind of be pretty much shaven headed at the time, and I had like black and white face paint. Because I was really influenced by a group called Dialect.
What were they called?
Dialect. They're like
Okay.
from Philadelphia. They're like kind of industrial noise hip hop outfit, and I'm very like, it's really weird because I didn't necessarily always fall in with the popular bands
Yeah.
that everyone else was going to see. I was like, I'm more interested into this. So you
Yeah.
can go and see, you know, like kind of like your Radioheads and stuff like that. I'm going to go and see this thing because this is more what I'm feeling.
Yeah, there's something super exciting about that, and discovering new music and new artists and seeing artists on their arc of discovering themselves, right?
Mm,
Before they get big, when when there's this sort of pure creativity happening,
yeah.
when you see brilliance. I guess a good example for me would be Prince, right? Because like obviously
Wow.
he turned into a huge mega star, but some of his first early gigs were at the club at First Avenue.
Wow. That must have
And,
been really special.
oh my God, there's nothing to this day really like those shows. But it was seeing an artist as they were really connecting with audiences for the first time, finding their
Mm,
audience, and also maybe in a way this might sound a little weird, but before they knew they were great,
yeah.
where they're just kind of being blown away by themselves by what they're doing.
Wow.
When you talk about industrial stuff, I thought of one of the records I really liked this year, the Working Men's Club.
Oh, they're a great band.
Do you like that?
Yeah. I definitely do. I dig them. Because they're on a friend of mine's label. Because they're on Heavenly Records.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
And so like he's someone that some like all the Heavenly crew have gotten to know really well. Um, and sometimes I pinch myself because of like going, okay, this guy's put out this records by this person, this person, this person, this person. I find myself still getting a little bit kind of awestruck, you
That's
know, and
cool.
it's like, and there's always people which, even if I know them, I'll still kind of the teenage me will still come out and go like, right, you shouldn't be talking to this person. It's like, damn demigod, you nothing, damn demigod, you know. And so like, I mean, like one of my neighbours in Bristol is John Parrish.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I find myself sometimes bumping into him in like the local supermarket, and I'll go like, I'll still gonna find the 14-year-old me kind of coming out going,
Yeah.
you work with PJ Harvey, you work with Latango, you work with yada 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 sort of thing.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. You give him the chin nod and say hi, and
Yeah, and I mean he always comes up and says hello to me, and because
yeah,
he's a really lovely dude. I mean like
yeah,
that's the reason why so many artists want to work with him is because of if you're nice and easygoing, then it makes it then more people want to approach you sort of thing.
yeah. Especially somebody like him, who I mean, yeah, who's super talented and very collaborative,
Mm.
right? So yeah, that you've got to be. easy to deal with, or you know, make the experience a really good one for whoever you're collaborating with. If it's, you know, PJ Harvey or whoever, you know, like it's going to be a good experience.
Yeah,
Is why they keep coming back, you know.
exactly. And the other thing is that you do sometimes we forget that even though we idolize some of these people, that they are just human beings in the end of the day.
Oh, totally.
You know, it's like kind of like it's like kind of bumping into like Jeff Barrow and stuff like that, and like kind of in like local record shops sort of thing. And you do forget that they are just like kind of just human beings, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. Like it, Portishead were a huge band for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I was running a radio station in Minneapolis in the 90s, and we were the first ones to ever play Portishead
Wow.
in the US. And I was in awe of that record, and saw them a bunch of times. Like,
Mm.
but about a year, well, this would have been before quarantine, obviously, maybe 2.5 years ago, I was at the station on a Saturday,
Yeah.
and Beak were doing
Yeah.
an in studio, but I didn't know they were there.
Wow.
I was just working and doing some work, and I was like, oh shit, there's a band down the hall, you know. And I walk in, and it's like Jeff Barrow, and I'm like, you know, had one of those moments
Yeah.
of freezing, like, oh my god, you know. And then, you know, then I got over it. We talked, and obviously he's just a beautiful, wonderful person.
Yeah. I think
But
that's the thing is that sometimes I completely forget that and I go like, right, okay, because I saw them play one of their biggest ever shows actually, which would have been because there used to be a big festival in Bristol called Ashton Court Festival, which is like a huge community event. It was like the biggest community festival in Europe, and they ended up playing to like over 200,000 people. And it was like, wow, it was like the biggest event. It was the only festival that they used to have in Bristol, you know, in the West
yeah,
Country, apart from Glastonbury.
yeah.
And
When you,
it was like,
when you say community festival, what do you mean? What does that mean?
what it means is that it was like basically organised by like a community committee, and it was all like kind of all about mostly promoting local artists.
Yeah,
They gave a huge stages, and they had um, stuff like they had everything from music through to theatre through to like kind of poetry. They had you know it was like stages dedicated to everything.
yeah, yeah,
So they'd have and it was like the biggest stage, especially for like local artists. They gave them like a huge main stage, and quite often they'd end up with like a national headliner, and it'd be like, right, okay, it'd be like the local acts would be like, right, this is a competition for us to upstage the national headliner, and some of the things I saw were quite extraordinary, from like laptops performing cover versions, um, through to people like Mad Nomad who like could have dressed up as pigs, covering like the stage with like kind of baked beans and you know
wow.
what have you. It was basically like every arsenal that they could bring to basically upstage the head to make the headliners look boring. It was like they would basically do it.
That sounds like fun.
It was really great fun. I mean, what's your experience of? Sorry if I'm randomly jumping around with questions of like festivals in the US. I mean, did you have like a festival culture as such?
Yeah, and it's really evolved. You know, the reason I asked about the community ones is a lot of times those tend to be in the past kind of smaller ones here.
Yeah,
So to hear of a community fest that has like 200,000 people is amazing.
I think most of them just basically jumped the fence. I think that's what most of it was. I think most of them were just like, you know, like kind of because of where that festival site was. It was right on top of like the highest point of Bristol. And
Yeah,
so you could literally overlook like the suspension bridge and like kind of look down the city. And it was like a good like hour and a half. It was like a good hour trek outside of the city centre sort of thing. But
I,
you know, it was like the only event of the summer,
yeah, yeah.
really.
To really look forward to. I think in the US, things have evolved. You know, years ago, decades ago, the festivals were kind of big and maybe sort of unruly, you know, your Lollapaloozas,
Yeah.
those kind of things. And then, you know, I think festivals over the years tried to figure out how to have more intimate, special
Mm.
experiences, you know, bringing in, as you talked about, different disciplines. So maybe theater, performance art, comedy, food, you know, how do you localize things? And
Yeah.
then, you know, in the last, man, decade or maybe longer, there's been, you know, your big festivals. And we had a really fairly big one out here called
Mm.
Sasquatch.
Yeah, I've heard of Sasquatch.
And it was like, it was at the Gorge Amphitheater, which is like one of the most beautiful places on the planet.
Mm.
You're in the high desert kind of, and then you go, so it looks kind of flat and whatever, and then all of a sudden you approach this amphitheater, which is overlooking a river that's created a gorge, and it's almost like you're at the Grand Canyon,
Wow.
and the stage is right on the edge, and it's beautiful. And it's one of those settings where the setting itself almost upstages the band,
Mm.
or it enhances the experience so much. And they would get really great headliners, you know, like Radiohead or Sigur Rós,
Yeah.
you know, playing this epic space. But it was cool because it might be the same kind of bill that you'd see at a festival where there's 50,000 people or
Mm.
80,000 or 100,000, but this was only, the capacity was 20,000.
Yeah.
So it still felt really cool. But there's also been in recent years this drive to create sort of micro festivals.
Mm.
And there's an incredible festival out here in Oregon outside of Portland called Pickathon.
Yep, I've heard of. I've been seeing some of the videos from Picton, and it looks amazing.
Yeah, the name is misleading. I didn't go for a number of years. I thought it sounded like it was sort of a bluegrassy thing,
Mm.
but
It's
it's
not.
not.
It's so not that. I mean, like I've been, yeah, some of the stuff which I've been watching from there has just been like the setting just looks
Yeah,
absolutely gorgeous.
yeah, and part of what they do, part of it's in this magical setting. You know, it's on in the woods,
Mm.
and I've gotten to DJ a couple times. One stage is in the small little hill where so kind of a natural amphitheater with woods on the side, but it's kind of cleared up, and there's hay bales for people to
Mm.
sit on. The stage isn't big. The stage is probably not much bigger than the
Yeah.
back of this room here. And they've taken, there's trees around the stage, and they've taken the branches and weaved them together. So
Mm.
there's like a natural canopy almost. And then they put lights in. And so at night it's amazing. And maybe like 500 people or so.
Yeah.
And I've DJ'd up on top of the, like midway through where the soundboard is, for like Built to Spill and Dinosaur Jr. and just really magical experiences in the woods. And then they have all these lights throughout the woods. So it's like just a cool experience.
Sounds
Um,
amazing. I mean,
so that's kind of where I think, for me at least, the more interesting festivals are, the kind of more micro festivals. The guy who started Sasquatch started one called Thing,
well, okay.
and the Thing Festival. And the first one was, let's see, when did we get locked down? So the first one would have been 2019.
Wow.
And, you know, we would have had one this last year. Obviously we didn't, but it's a cool old fort. And like Kroonbin played. It was just a really cool mix of artists. You know, that De La Soul played. It's just like, it was cool. And small, like no more than 4,000 people, maybe 5.
But also, it reminds me of like actually sometimes how much the setting does create the atmosphere of a festival. You know, like two of my favorite festivals, partly because of the settings are really beautiful. Both Green Man and Under the Road Festival. I mean, the Green Man Festival, the main stage is literally because it's in amongst the mountains on the edge of the Welsh mountains, and so like it's got a natural amphitheatre kind of built around it, and so you can see like mountains in the background, and it's like maybe about 30,000 people, sort of thing. They get people like obviously like Fleet Foxes, Beach House, Idols played there last year, and they had through to like stuff like Fuck Buttons, Holy Fuck, like
Yeah.
scenes, and they kind of like mixed because it generally had a perception of being like more of a folky festival sort of thing, but it's like.
But if they have idols and DLCs, there's some serious rocking going on.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean that was the most rammed I've ever seen the Far Out tent, which is like a big. I'd say about 7,000-8,000, maybe 10,000 capacity tent. I mean, I was DJing before them, and it was like I was looking out, going like, "Holy fuck, how many people are in here?" Because literally half the people went to see. I think half the people went to see Father John Misty, and then the other half of basically everybody pretty much went to see Idols. And it was just like one of those kind of moments where I was like going, okay, I was absolutely shattered because I'd done about 7 sets, admittedly. So that's how I paid for my ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Was that they were like, right, okay, we'll give you a free ticket if you spin some records.
Nice.
Fine.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. And I think I did because I was doing like the changeover sets in between the bands.
Yeah, that's super fun.
So like the Idols one, that was insane. I mean, they gave me a massive shout out.
Nice.
And like kind of dedicated like kind of love song to me, and I was like a bit in tears. I mean, because I've actually had several shout outs that day. So also James Heather, who's a guy who used to work for Ninja Tune, but he does like really, really beautiful contemporary classical kind of stuff. And he was opening up the stage that day. And that actually really did have me in tears because of his whole thing was like, right, okay, I wish that my dad was alive here to see me some at the moment because I've learned that to actually have confidence to chase my dreams. This one goes out to Jeff because of like he's learning to chase his dreams as well, and that actually, you know, and I think there is a, yeah, I can feel myself kind of really wet even thinking about it now, welling up a bit really.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's super sweet, you know. When you DJ something like that, obviously if you're playing in front of idols and you're also playing in front of a more electronic, classical, neoclassical thing, are you spinning vinyl and do you just bring a crate with you and think about like what your sets are going to be like?
No, I just basically kind of like I'll like figure out something which will fit with the band previously, and then I'll just go like, right, okay, whatever comes out the box going on, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so like people could get played all sorts of stuff. So from like whether it be like French drummers like playing through electronic distortions through to like bands like The World or like Millennium Club or like Uranium Club or just things which take my fascination.
Yeah. Did you say Uranium Club, like out of Minneapolis?
Yeah. Oh,
God,
man,
I love them. Their vinyl is so hard to find.
They're one that, well, I found them because of my friends run Specialist Subject, who like kind of a record label and shop, who are based above a venue called The Exchange. And I remember finding one of their records and going, what the hell's this? And then they started playing it to me. I was like, this is freaking amazing. This is like probably one of the best post-punk bands I've ever heard.
Yeah, yeah, it's so good.
And it's just like, it was one of those things where I was like, you know, so many bands who kind of label themselves as a genre, but I don't feel that they really are.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Although
oh,
they're like,
totally.
There's like a sanitized version, whereas hearing like Uranium Club, it's like, hang on, this is really quite off the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, and I don't know bands, like, as human beings, we want to be able to describe stuff and categorize stuff, right?
Mm.
So we come up with these terms um, and labels, but I know they also are really confining. Like bands don't want to be pigeonholed, like,
Yeah,
uh, but but they have to describe themselves. I have to write down Uranium Club. I have to play them today on my show.
yeah, they're phenomenal. I mean, like, I wonder what they're going to be coming up with next. They're one of the few bands which I've never seen live. Just 'cause I've never had the chance to see Uranium Club live, but the 2 or 3 records that I've got by them, it's just been like, wow, okay, you could do this.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is
I've heard
great.
great things. I still have friends and family from in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, and so I'm always asking, like, what's going on musically? Who do I need to know
Mm.
about? And Uranium Club is how I ended up hearing about them that way. And people were like, "Oh my God, they're just incredible live." When we were talking about Pickathon, and then you mentioned the OCs
Yeah.
at Green Man, and man, I saw this band at Pickathon uh, from Italy called BBC.
I know the BBCs.
They
Yeah.
they they, they were like Devo meets the OCs meets Uranium Club, total punky garage rock, super fun live.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've definitely come across them. I think I've got friends who know them quite well actually. Some of my Italian friends who are in Bristol sort of thing.
Yeah,
Because they put them on at like venues like the Old England, which is like one of the best DIY venues in, well, in my opinion. And it's like it's one of those kind of literally 100 capacity kind of old pubs sort of thing. And the last 5 6 years, they put on some of the best shows that I've seen. I mean, people like Paul Jacobs. I don't know if you've come across him at all.
no,
Oh, he's amazing. He's also the drummer in Pottery.
okay, yeah, love
His
pottery.
solo stuff is like wow.
Okay, I'm gonna
I
be
mean,
checking
like
that.
in fact, I've spoken several times to like the members of Pottery. Go, do you realize how good your drummer actually your drummer's solo records are? And they were like, yeah,
out.
because yeah, I mean, like I came across him because of my friends who run a label called Stolen Body, who specialize in putting out like kind of, I guess more like psyche kind of garagey kind of stuff and like kind of like some slightly dreamy kind of stuff. They put out several of his albums, and I'd like literally turn up, especially a place like the Old England, just because of like seeing a person's name or seeing if it was connected to like something that a friend of mine was putting out. I was like, right, okay, I'll go and check this out.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to see him, I think, because I used to have a thing where sometimes I'd sprint half the way across the city to go from one show to another. I don't know if you've ever done that at all,
Oh, all
Kevin.
the time. I mean, obviously you do it at festivals, or not, like more city festivals, like something like South by Southwest or um, Eurosonic,
Oh,
where you go from, there might be like last year at Eurosonic, Sinead O'Brien,
oh, she's great.
Black Country New Road. We're
Brilliant band.
playing at Vera, and then this band from Hungary, Qualitons, were playing at another venue 3 blocks away. So you're kind of running around catching as much as you can. But I love that you do that just on any given night in
Yeah,
Bristol.
I mean, like I would literally find myself sometimes, looking up, going, right, what time's this person starting? So I'm at this show, and this show finishes at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then I'll be like, right, okay, I'm going to peg it across because this person was really, really good like a couple of weeks ago, or like maybe I don't know, like the last time that I saw them, and sometimes I mean we've got really lucky because of like some of the venues are really close together.
Yeah,
I don't know what like the venues are like in like where you are at the moment, whether you got any like kind of venues like on the same street sort of thing.
yeah. It sounds like Bristol's really, pre-COVID. has a really vibrant club scene.
Yeah, it was really good because of like I remember one time having um we had like Big Thief were playing SWX. Then over the road in like Rough Trade they had Big Brave. So it's like I was literally trying to find out, you know, like set times for both the shows.
The
And I
two,
was like, could it go like, I ended up kind of like tweeting, can it go like Big Thief, Big Brave, Big Jeff, Big Trouble?
nice.
And, you know, but then like, because I guess that I'm really lucky, so like most of the venues were within less than 4 minutes walk, really.
Yeah.
But
See,
then,
that's great. Seattle's more spread out where, there is a kind of an area called Capitol Hill where there's an amazing venue called Numos, and then there's some smaller venues around there. But then there's another area of town called Ballard where there's the Tractor Tavern and the Sunset where I saw Idols, and that's a great space area too. But it'd be hard to go back and forth on a night.
mm, yeah, I mean, I guess, well, the thing is, I don't do like that much. I mean, because I found that like that sometimes I was racking up like nearly 300 and something shows a year.
I
Because
love that.
I find myself, you know, like, it's like my tweets used to be basically just listing off all the shows that are on that night.
Yeah.
It was like, do I go to like kind of, because they'd have something like Meshuggah at the Academy, you know, for like the metal sort of thing, or do I go to like somewhere in the center? Like there used to be a venue called Start the Bus, who used to have shows which would be on like midnight sort of thing, or like venues like the Croft, which was a great, you know, like I guess alternative punk venue mostly. The Louisiana, and it sometimes I'd literally decide on like the 11th hour.
Hmm.
And if it was a sold out show, I'd literally turn up about 4 hours before the doors opened.
Yeah.
Just because I was like, right, I'm this determined to go and see the show.
Yeah. 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 No, that's
I
great.
get there when bands were loading in, or like kind of, I might say hello to them if I plucked up the confidence,
Yeah.
sort of thing. But then, like, quite often I wouldn't, because I'd just be standing there kind of like awkwardly.
Been there. But that's a commitment, and then there's always a groundbreaker. There's there can be those magical moments where something happens to make that, to allow for there to be a connection, right?
Yeah. And I think that, you know, sometimes some of the more magical shows I've seen haven't been in necessarily the big rooms. They've always been usually in the more intimate settings.
Yeah, that's usually
Um,
the case for me. A few bands can like create magic in huge spaces. U2,
yeah.
they can still do it. Or the last couple times I saw them, I guess I haven't seen them in like 5 years, but
Wow. I think for me, like, the few artists I probably go and see at big venues, like, obviously Nick Cave for me would be one of them.
yeah,
I think like Nick Cave, Björk, people like Björk as well, because like, you know, with Björk, it's like you're going into their world. It's like artists who you know that you're going to go, right, okay, you may not always feel comfortable in their world, but
yeah,
if they're bringing their world to you, then it's like it's spectacle.
yeah. That's a really great point. Her stuff's amazing. Yeah, yeah, big festivals. Usually I prefer the more intimate and newer kind of bands, smaller bands. But yeah, I saw Nick Cave at Glastonbury, or no, at Roskilde,
Wow.
maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So like at least 100,000 people watching.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, I wonder if you'll be able to really connect, and it was amazing. It was transcendent. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, like I saw him. I mean, I've seen him a few times, mostly at festivals, like from About the Sound or Glastonbury.
Yep.
But I saw him. I remember, like my friend, who's a really obsessive British Sea Power fan, basically bought me a ticket and like kind of said, right, like kind of come with me if you want to come to see Nick Cave, and he basically booked out this massive. He's kind of very well off, so he booked out this massive corporate box. I remember because I'm used to like, I guess the maximum biggest venue I'd been into, apart from like in my teenage years going to like arenas, had been going to like a 2,000 capacity concert hall. So arriving on this high up in this huge kind of corporate box, it took me like 45 minutes to calm down. And then it was an amazing show. I mean, like, because he did the whole thing of like kind of dancing in amongst the audience and then getting people up on stage towards the end.
Yeah.
And little did I know it, but one of my friends was actually sat above me, sort of thing. There's a guy in the AF gang called Simon Mason, who's like the Scottish version of me. He's like the Scottish version of me, but with air miles.
Yeah.
So it's like, I remember him one weekend going to like a Stoner versus Doom kind of festival up in, I think it was Sheffield or somewhere. And literally him flying back to Edinburgh, which is where he's from. I think he lasted about 20 minutes in there before he was literally jetting back down to London to go and see Richard Thompson's 70th anniversary.
Wow.
Kind of show. And it's like, yeah, he's definitely like so definitely, I mean, I've done shows sometimes, you know, traveling from nearby cities sort of thing, going to like maybe 2 in one night sort of thing, but never kind of going from country to country.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So are there any independent venue week stuff you're recommending?
I mean, like, I would say, I'm not quite sure what the full schedule is really. I mean, I know that I'm having to take part in a panel with like Andy Burnham, who's like Manchester's like kind of the mayor of Manchester sort of thing, which is like, okay, that's definitely something I never foresaw on my horizon at all. And because last year I was like kind of off fly jetting around the country, going visiting spaces that I've never been to before.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, there's loads of places, especially in England, that I've never actually been to. So it's like I've never really done. So like Newcastle, like Sheffield, the Lead Mill. But I remember walking in there, literally feeling like a kid in a candy shop. You know, like kind of so seeing all like Jarvis Cocker's original artwork and stuff, and it's like I was like, excuse me, but please, can someone pinch me?
Yeah. Yeah. Bridges to historic venues. It's amazing, right?
Yeah, but then also like it got taken to a place called the Trades Club in Hebden Bridge, which is one of the most beautiful rooms I've ever been in. It's like, I mean, I really hope that a lot of the venues that I visited really do survive.
Yeah.
They're really important for the local communities.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that it really reminded me of, this that, you know, how much, you know, like I found that, you know, having venues in certain parts of cities, they've actually helped improve like the surrounding areas. I don't know if you found that at all, like with where you were, sort of thing.
Totally. I think clubs and venues play just such a key, important role in the community in so many ways, right? Like it becomes, like we were talking about earlier, home for people.
Yeah.
So there's a social aspect to it. You also, just when you just think about music, period, right? Like music for most people or music lovers, it's essential. You know, it's like air, it's like water, it's like food.
Yeah.
We can't imagine living in a world without music. Like it's so almost inconceivable. You know, music enriches our lives and inspires us and uplifts us, and it makes us understand parts about ourselves that we can't explain very well, right? When you hear a beautiful song, you connect with it on a deep emotional level that it's like, oh yeah, like that's why sometimes we give mixtapes to people. Like it's a way to communicate. Like, here's the shit I can't say, but these songs say it.
I was like kind of trying to do like kind of mixed CDs where it'd be like, right, okay, here's every single one of my emotions explained on a like kind of 25 track CD. It'd be like, okay, here's some songs which are angry, here's some songs which are kind of sad, here's some like kind of danceable kind of like songs. Here's some kind of like I don't know, like what sort of things. I guess most of it would have like, because I guess that most of it would be stuff which I'd be listening to as a teenager, which was kind of at the time a lot of crossover rock sort of stuff,
Yeah.
especially because of like well, some of my friends were getting into Radiohead. I was getting into like kind of Dub War and like kind of, I guess, slightly lesser known kind of alternative UK rock sort of things.
Hmm.
Really, because if I didn't feel the same connection, because it was
Yeah.
like, because I felt like it was like, it's really weird because if I try and explain my relationship with to people about Radiohead, it's like I don't entirely hate them and I don't entirely love them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's part of what's amazing about them. They're a complicated band. They really, and they're really experimental too. So
I think sometimes people bring that up and I go like, Björk.
yeah,
Okay, so, I mean, like someone, but I guess it's partly just because of like kind of going to school in the 90s and it was like they were everywhere. It was
yeah,
like you couldn't really avoid them, and
yeah,
so like I mean like I guess I took to more reading like kind of like the more rock press sort of thing.
yeah. I
And
totally get that. Sometimes, that's one thing that's super cool about music too, is you can't get everything all the time, right? There's more music than we can possibly listen to. And sometimes there's these outlying factors, right? Like, so you're young,
yeah,
you see all these people getting into Radiohead, so you might react against that.
mm,
And then a decade or two later, go back and listen to those albums
yeah,
and go, damn, those were really good.
yeah.
Um,
That's exactly what kind of did slightly happen. I mean, um, I remember like kind of like when they played Primavera Sound sort of thing, and I was a bit like, no, I'm not going to go see them because Donus Virginia, who's like Jay Mascis, is one of my admittedly heroes.
yeah,
He's like someone that I still get, like kind of turn into like a screaming teenager around. And Tortoise were playing at the same time. So it's like, I'm going to go for these two sort of thing.
yeah, yeah, I love that. So, yeah, the music, the venue situation, there's music's essential. Venues provide an opportunity for us to experience it with others.
Mm,
So there's a communal aspect. Like, think about idols. Like, if we only could hear their records, they'd be great. Their records
yeah.
are great. But to go see them live is a whole nother thing altogether.
Oh, definitely. But then,
It,
to be honest, it's like I saw them growing from when they were terrible. And
yeah,
they were terrible for a few years. I mean, like, but then you've got to start off somewhere.
totally, right?
I
And
mean, that's actually something which Joe did actually bring up at Green Man because he said that, oh yeah, Joe, this is Jeff, he's our friend. Um, he basically said to us, you need to get better. Like, so I've always tried to, like, kind of eke out constructive criticisms.
yeah, yeah, and
And I think
that's
it's
great.
partly because of,
And
even he
being
admits
honest.
he's not the greatest singer,
Yeah,
but I think it was when he was like kind of trying to be like the Maccabees. And it's like, they kind of like did blow hot and cold for quite a while, but then
they
I
figured
think
it
just
out.
sometimes just things click.
Yeah. And sometimes
Um,
it takes time. I mean, so when you're talking about clubs and how important they are, that's another great point, right? So there's the part for us as music lovers to go and
hmm,
community, but those smaller venues where a band can go when they suck
yeah,
and learn how to play and play in front of people and get over the fear of playing in front of people and learn how to do it. Like, if we need that,
oh, we
we,
definitely do. So I think that the great thrill also with like the Louisiana is that there was no backstage, or the backstage was basically right behind the kind of the gig room, and so like the band actually had to walk through the audience to actually get on the
yeah,
stage, and actually it was great because sometimes you can see the whites of people's eyes and you can see, you feel the kind of almost slightly nervousness sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been one or two times when admittedly when I used to be shaven headed, so I used to slightly terrify people because like I was basically staring at them intently, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But usually sometimes it was like you knew that within the first few seconds whether it was going to be a good show. You could just
Yeah.
sometimes pick up on an atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
saw Fleet Foxes and Beach House do a co-headline show in there, and that was absolute magic. That was like one of those kind of gigs where I didn't know anything about Beach House. They came on and with the swirling kind of harmonium and just like kind of I was like, okay, you've got to be something really special to follow up this lot.
Yeah.
And then out came Fleet Foxes with the 7-part harmonies, and it was just like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, they're amazing. So good.
I mean, I was so glad that I got to see them playing at like in a Green Man, not last year, the year before, like headlining the main stage, and it was just like I could literally feel all the hairs on the back of my neck going up on end.
Yeah, Fleet Foxes. Their roots are in Seattle, and at the station, I wish I had it here with me. They gave us a CDR. We still have it. Before they got signed, it's just a CDR with a Sharpie written Fleet Foxes, and it has like 4 songs on it. And they gave it to us, and it was great. We started playing it like right away, and then Sub Pop signed them. Boom.
You know, I mean, like, well, to be honest, it's just like just hearing those harmonies.
Yeah.
There's something about like kind of intuitive harmonic singing, which always will emotionally, especially someone like myself, put me in place. So it's like kind of sometimes when you hear bands which are siblings, like the Staves, for instance, it's like even though like most people will see me go and they expect me to just be into like hard rock or punk and stuff, and it's like no, there's so much kind of stuff out there, really.
Totally, right? Like, why limit ourselves? Like, there's so much incredible music. Just be open to it and have our minds blown and our lives enriched. And yeah, I love that about hardcore music lovers, where you can see somebody you know at a punk show, and you see them at a hip hop show the next night, and you see them at the bigger roasts, and it's like that's living.
It really is. I mean, because one of my first DJ sets at Green Man, I had the DJ for. Have you ever heard of Richard Dawson?
Oh yeah. Totally.
I had the DJ before him and his band once, and it was possibly one of the most nerve-wracking but also beautiful experiences, because it was like I think it was probably the second or third time that I've actually DJ'd myself. Yeah. And I was like, okay, it was in a rammed tent with like 10,000 people, and Richard Dawson was sound checking, and he's literally the loudest singer I've ever heard live. I mean, like the way that he basically physically puts his entire body into the performance, he was just like making not just a stage rattle, but all the whole tent. You just feel it vibrating. I mean, like when I say to people that his stuff does like kind of transcend folk into metal sort of thing, I'm like, right, go and see him. Go and see, especially even if it's just him with the acoustic guitar. It's not going to be nice. It's not going to be like kind of gentle. It's because quite often I feel that sometimes, especially within the folk world, when people do go, "Oh, this is going to be folk. It's going to be nice and lovely," it's like, no, not always.
Yeah, no, it can be so raw and in your face and vulnerable.
But it's also his ability to actually tell multiple tales in one song.
Yeah.
And it's just like, which I think is actually kind of quite unique about him. And it's kind of like sometimes you have to go, because he will play like 16th century traditional kind of folk songs, and you'd be like, is this a 16th century folk song? Is this a Richard Dawson original? And I mean, he's lovely as well. He's like, so I've had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times.
Yeah.
And the amount of times when I've seen him and I've been like, right, okay, earplugs in because I know that what's going to come out is going to be utter cheapos.
Yeah.
He's like the Lemmy of singing, basically.
Wow, that's super cool.
But
Uh,
I was wondering, like, how did you first get started with like kind of DJing on and like kind of doing radio, really?
Growing up, I just love music, and music kind of was everything. And I just bought records, listened to music played in bands when I was in, junior high school.
Mm.
And then when I went to college, I, s- I w- I was volunteering. I started volunteering at the college radio station, and then that to me became a real eye opener, and I loved it.
Mm.
But I love music more than anything, more than like I could never DJ someplace like at a radio station where I couldn't play what I wanted to play.
Mm.
And most radio stations are formatted. KEXP is the opposite of that, where all of our DJs have the freedom to curate and program their own shows, and we do it in real time based on events that are happening in the world, and so that's where my heart is. And so I worked at the college radio station, and that got me into, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, I created a independent study degree in radio broadcasting.
Wow.
So that's kind of how I got into that was my college, part of my college education. But when I finished college, I moved back to Minneapolis and was playing in a couple bands. And there weren't really any radio stations I could work at because they were all formatted.
You're like an
And
FM rock sort of thing.
yeah, exactly. Right. Where you'd have to play.
ZZ Top or like kind of whatever
Exactly.
kind of cheesy kind of white American motorcycle riding.
Exactly. So I wasn't interested in that. And I was way into like music. And this, I did an internship at a big station in Washington, D.C. I went to Georgetown University for a while, and they had a 100,000 watt station. It covered all of D.C. and part of Baltimore, so it was huge. And I was like young, and I got to do a little bit of a show there. And it was a station that was really, this was at a pivotal point. It was like the first station in the U.S. to really play the Sex Pistols, and they played Roxy Music, but they'd also play Bruce Springsteen and Patti Smith, and they'd play Happy the Man and experimental Gentle Giant, prog rock from the UK, and so it was really all over the place, but nothing mainstream, and that changed everything for me when I realized that, wow, there's so much incredible music. You can mix it up. And that's when when I moved back to Minneapolis, I started, I was playing in a band. We were shitty, but, I was just trying to play in a band. And every night I'd go to the Longhorn, and there was a DJ there, Peter Jesperson. He ended up starting a record label called Twin Tone. And he was the Replacements manager and put out amazing records. But I would show up right as soon as the doors opened just to listen to him DJ. And he would play everything from the brand new Buzzcocks single into Elvis Presley, into Donna Summer, into The Only Ones, like it was, but it all made sense somehow musically. He made it all fit. And, he would do that. And then like a Minneapolis band, the Suburbs, would play, and they'd open for Iggy Pop, whatever, it was like amazing. So it was while there, and just that kind of formed sort of my musical approach to how I wanted to DJ. So I didn't want to go to a radio station, but that's when I started working at what became First Avenue. Wow. So instead of working at a radio, I started working in clubs. And so I worked at First Ave, and I worked there for 10 years. And then it was at that point when radio kind of caught up with the world, and there was an opportunity to start at an alternative rock station, but it was still pretty formatted. So I did 3 specialty shows. I did like a show that played all the UK imports called Duty
Okay.
Free Imports. So I would play like the new Mega City 4, you know, whatever the new records were that were imports. And then I did a dance night because I love dance music, like an electronic show, and then just a new music show. So kind of, you know, one thing led to another. It's almost like you talked about when you know, played at that first day or the opening act at
Like a
Green
green man.
Man. The guy gave you the shout out for
Yeah.
pursuing your passion. That's what it was like for me, because then First Avenue turned into this pretty big club, and the radio station that I worked at in Minneapolis ended up, it was a commercial station, so it ended up selling and turning into like a young country station. But that provided the opportunity for a small group of us to start a station from scratch in Minneapolis. And it's that station there, Rev 105.
Oh, wow.
And it was super eclectic, you know, where, and we'd have like 300 bands play live. And that's where, you know, we played Portishead for the first time in the US. And that was a great experience. And then that turned into, ultimately, I moved to Seattle like 20 years ago. And I came out here to help Amazon launch their music site. And I knew of the station KCMU, so started volunteering there. And we turned that into KEXP.
Wow.
And that's, so for me, it's just, I've been really fortunate to just be able to align my love for music with a way to express it. And I got to tell you, during, like, I've been doing a show on KEXP almost 20 years now, and it's amazing, and it's free form. I do whatever I want. But during the quarantine, during this last year, having a creative outlet where I can connect with the community of people who I feel like we need music and we need connection more than ever right now.
Definitely.
And then, you know, things have been pretty fucked up in the US in the last 4 years,
Yes,
up until 2 days ago.
Yeah. To be honest, I mean, it's been pretty bad over here as well, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and it's been
both,
bad.
We've both got our demons that we're kind of wrangling with, you know, especially revolving around politics, you know, kind of.
Yep.
I mean, we've got like, I mean, I could rant for hours about how much our government's basically seemingly trying to kill culture in this country. And it's like, I think sometimes, especially by the politicians, by not just, I know this might be a bit of generalizing sort of thing, but I feel that sometimes in this country that the arts and culture sector is really undervalued actually as to how important it is, because of, it's like the one thing which helped us get out of the recession like 10 years ago was live music.
Yeah.
And actually more people actually started going to gigs because they felt the need to connect, and also that they weren't necessarily going to the big stadium shows. They were going more to like places like the Brixton Windmill, the Louisiana, and you know, these places are, you know, they're it's like everyone's, you know, creative output is interlinked in there. There's people who are like kind of either artists who form there. There's kind of like sometimes also the people who work behind the bars are quite often in bands and musicians, and like kind of like people who set up record labels. I mean, I find myself, because I've also got a really weird thing next week where I'm having to do like kind of stuff because I've got a big exhibition which is supposed to be happening in June in Bristol. Because I've done lots of like oil painting and like kind of stop motion animation kind of stuff.
The paintings I've seen of yours, I love.
Cheers, thank you very much.
Yeah, they're really cool.
I also took up the challenge of actually drawing at shows.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would literally, even at Idols, like at Ali Pali, I end up drawing kind of all of Idols pretty much whilst they were playing, in amongst a massive mosh pit. And Like I remember like kind of halfway through the show getting a tap on the back of the elbow, and Stephen Mack was behind me, and so he kind of came up to me with a massive grin because I've drawn Stephen Mack a couple
Nice.
of times, sort of thing, just because if I'd been on his radio show, so it's been like, okay,
Yeah.
if people, you know, like, because I think that sometimes the reason why I do it is a bit pretentious, admittedly, because it's like makes me go, haha, look what I can do, sort of thing. And then, but then also, I think for me, it's like proving challenges.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think sometimes we do need to challenge ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. We do. And, you know, we got to face our fears, you know, especially when you can find a good creative outlet, like for
Yeah.
you painting or drawing or putting yourself in a situation where you're in a mosh pit trying to draw it. Come on, man.
There's sometimes I think one of the best reactions I got was when JPEG Mafia played in Bristol, and I think he lasted about literally 20 seconds on stage before his like stage diving.
Yeah.
And I managed to capture this picture of him, you know, with the arms out, with his like kind of his bandana on, and I think it was. I remember it being like really really hot because it was like middle of June, so it was absolutely boiling, and I think he had to sprint off the stage 3 times because he's on the verge of passing out.
Wow.
Sort of thing. So like the high energy and the whole room was absolutely bouncing, and you feel like literally sweat dripping off your neck. But he was outside after the show, and you know, kind of greeting some of the fans, sort of thing. And someone managed to film him literally staring at my picture, but as I showed him, and it's just like, "You were doing that," sort of thing. And
Very cool.
quite often I get artists to sign them as well. So whether it be like kind of like Stephen O'Malley from Sun, or like
Yeah.
I managed to get MC Ride, actually, amazingly enough.
Wow. So you were going to do an exhibit in June?
Yeah, it was going to be like it was originally it meant for May last year originally, and I did like it was a mixture of like kind of portraits, but also like a mixture of kind of quite subversive painting. So sometimes it depended on my mood.
Mm-hmm.
So quite a lot of it was dealing with things like mental health and about, you know, things involving like anxiety and then also sometimes I'd be taking, you know, literally taking my like a 10-inch tablet to gigs and taking blurry pictures of them and using them to do portraits. So I did like Saul Williams when he was doing Martin Luther King,
Mm-hmm.
and I got a really amazing picture of him literally leaning out over the audience. And so I turned that into a painting. I've done Rachel Aggs, who's in like shopping and trash kits. She's someone that I've been really lucky to become friends with, just because I've just turned up to loads of her shows basically, and occasionally said hello to her.
Yeah.
And who else have I done? I've got Galen Lee, who's a really amazing disabled violinist.
Yep. From Minnesota.
Yeah, I saw her playing like a really amazing show in Bristol in like a kind of accessible community centre. And what made it even more amazing is that I've got a friend of mine who runs a company called Soundbeam, who are like specializing in making musical instruments so that even disabled people can play.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all using like an infrared kind of laser beams and stuff like that. And he'd created this kind of piece of software which meant that sometimes people could play along with artists. And so they had like a video of Galen Lee, and because I did the usual thing of not knowing where the venue necessarily was, and if I don't always know that, then I'll always kind of turn up early. And I literally turned up just to see her duetting with herself. But I was like, this is amazing. So I was literally stood behind her wheelchair, and it's like, yeah, I was left absolutely speechless.
Wow,
Then,
that's
then she played the show, and she also joined in with both of her support acts
Hmm.
without knowing who the hell, without knowing any of the songs. Just literally started jamming with them, and it's like, this is, this is magic. You
Yeah.
won't get this at like an O2 Academy. You won't get, or you might do occasionally, but not to that extent. Where you get to see someone turn up early to watch someone, see someone's sound check, see them actually literally duetting with themselves.
Yeah, I mean that's just all those are really good points and examples of again the why venues are so important
Yeah,
in the experience of live music and creativity in real time that you're experiencing in the moment and it might not ever happen again.
yeah.
It's people coming together and then the audience always impacts the dynamic too and then we sort of just touched on it a little bit, but the economic role that clubs and venues play in a thriving culture and economy cannot ever be
It's a
under.
very fine balance, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it's really difficult with this stagnation to see
yeah,
where we can go from here. I mean, like, I know that some of the venues have been doing like interactive live streams. Like
yeah,
I saw like, the one for the Brixton Windmill was amazing because they literally recreated the actual almost like CGI kind of virtual reality tour of the entire building. Um, but then there's also stuff like people like the Exchange have been running like their own TV shows sort of thing,
yeah,
and I think that's one thing which I definitely found helping me throughout like the lockdowns has been, even if it's just been people down there, like kind of down their phones playing music. I mean, because during the first lockdown, I mean, I'm lucky where I live in Bristol. I've got several really beautiful parks, and quite often I'd turn my walks in the evening to whoever was broadcasting a live show or like pre-recorded gigs sort of thing, or like so it could be like Richard Thompson, This Is the Kid, or it could be like 20th Century Media doing like a black metal kind of special, or and I didn't have headphones as well. I'd just be literally playing it on my phone as I walked around and trying to. It made me much more aware of nature and how this is a kind of reminder that nature is ultimately going to rule everything. And I think that, but I also think that there's another, but it's also like a reminder of like, because I was trying to observe, especially with the kid when they're doing one of their sessions, I was like kind of seeing how the birds reacted, if the birds reacted in a different way.
yeah, yeah. It's a great point. I mean, that's one of the maybe the silver linings of the pandemic is it's forced us all to slow down a little bit and see things a little bit differently and maybe take stock of our place in nature.
Yeah,
I know like for me personally, like when I get out and go running a couple times a week, like I feel more connected than I used to. I'm
mm,
much more appreciative um, and I think that's been in part just because we've had to slow down a bit and
yeah.
everything's changed a bit. So I've got to go do my show.
Oh wow! So, thank you so much, Kevin. That's been absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, we could keep talking forever. There's so many things we didn't hit, but I've really enjoyed it. I'm going to play
Yeah,
Uranium Club today.
please do it.
Um,
Do it out loud.
give me another Bristol. Give me something. Give me a Bristol band I should check out.
Oh, there's quite a few. Off the top of my head, I'd say Lice. Their debut album's just come out, and it's really, really good. Scalping. Uh,
Scalping?
have you heard Scalping?
No.
Oh, they're phenomenal. They're
Okay, I'll check that
they're
out.
definitely a band you need to see live. They're definitely, because they're like a kind of live techno band.
Okay.
And it's the last time I saw them would have been in a sweaty basement, literally clinging onto the walls as the entire crowd was just completely erupting. Yeah, and who else would I recommend? I mean, like, to be honest, like Katie J. Pearson, Pet Shimmers, Svalbard. I mean, the Svalbard record, which came out towards the end of last year, was just beautiful. The way in which they managed to mix kind of like black metal and shoegaze together.
Cool.
Yeah, I find it really hard sometimes just singling out stuff for recommendation. I just go and check out this. Here's like a short list of about 200 artists.
Yeah, I know, right? I have the same challenge. This is great. Lice, I'm going to check out Scalping Uranium Club. I know I'll get that on the show today.
The Katie J. Pearson's record is beautiful.
Yeah, I haven't heard the new one, yeah.
And I'd say, I mean, I'm just trying to think of, I mean, like, there's people like EBU as well. She's really interesting because she does like kind of androgynous pop music. It's kind of like because her whole act is that she performs like she's an android.
Wow.
Sort of thing. And it's just like there's people like that, MXLX, who's like releasing like 4 or 5 albums a year. He probably played one of the most joyous kind of post-lockdown shows, because it just was just like the most upbeat techno that he'd basically created in his own flat by kind of like collecting loads of sounds by like tapping windows and stuff like that. But it was just like and then taking samples from like anime films and stuff like that. Dog-Eyed, if you really like just really beautiful songwriting. I could go on forever, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we're gonna have to email each other.
Yeah, definitely. But I hope that one day we can actually meet in the flesh.
Yeah, that would be great, and it will happen.
I was originally actually supposed to be coming out last year for South by Southwest, which would have been my first time actually in the States. But fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Yeah, man. Look after yourself, Kevin.
Yep. Take care. Be healthy. Stay strong. Keep loving music. Keep championing.
I will do. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.